Welcome, brave souls, to the chilling depths of horror in detail. Today we're going to share creepy clown horror stories. First story, The Real Pennywise. Before I begin, I would like to state and swear that this story is entirely truthful. You know how everyone says they are afraid of clowns? Well, I really am. I don't have a whole attitude of, oh, clowns are so creepy, teeth, smiley face. No. My attitude is more like, holy God, that monster is going to kill me. Let me explain why. When I was just 4 years old, some family friend were babysitting me. Their son Brad was the same age as I, and we were doing typical 4-year-old activities like playing with Legos, running around outside, and other things like that. Later that night, Brad and I went down to the basement where we saw Tara and Rob, Brad's parents, settling in to watch a movie. I asked if we could watch the movie too, but Rob told us that we were too young for this movie. After a few minutes of pouting, me and Brad made our way back up the stairs. But just before I was about to go through the door, Brad grabbed my arm and said, "Let's sit on the step and watch the movie. They can't see us from here." To be perfectly honest, as a child, I was a little bit of suck up. I really didn't want to disobey Brad's parents, but he kept insisting that we watch the movie. So there we sat on the steps and watched the unspeakable horrors of Stephen King's IT. I don't exactly know how much of the movie I made it through, but I remember distinctly screaming and running out of that basement at the part where Pennywise the clown comes through the bathroom drain. Most of that night is a blur, but there are a few things that this experience spawned. 1. From that moment on, I couldn't bear the sight of a clown. I still cannot. 2. I didn't understand that clowns were people. I thought that they were some type of alien life form sent down to kill children. 3. I opened the shower curtain every morning and checked the drain before getting in. I still do this. 4. Any person wearing an excessive amount of makeup repulsed me. They frightened me, and to this day, I cannot look them in the eye. Throughout the rest of my childhood, I couldn't handle situations where clowns were introduced. Around the time of my 8th birthday, my Opa surprised me by taking me to the circus. Within 20 minutes, we were back in the car, driving home. I had caused such a disruption from my crying and screaming that they had asked us to leave. Fast forward to about a year ago, and a lot has changed. I had then come to the point that I realized my fear of clowns was irrational, but still I couldn't seem to get over it. And then it happened. I used that previous line to increase suspense, but also because there is no other way to introduce what occurred on that cold February night. I was down at my foster family's pool house, just hanging out with my 2 best friends, Jeffrey and Rudy. Jeffrey and I were in a band together, and Rudy was a guy we knew from our choir at school. That night, I was recording some demos for our album, while Rudy was trying to make a move on Jeffrey lying in my bed. Trying my best to ignore them, I kept on recording. But then out of the corner of my eye, I noticed something in the window. I couldn't really tell what it was. It looked like some sort of pinkish blob. I alerted Jeffrey and Rudy of what I saw, but when we all looked back at the window, it was gone. The 2 guys started making fun of me, and I laughed with them, joking about seeing things and trying to scare one another. I went back to recording, and Rudy and Jeffrey kept messing around on the bed. Jeffrey was pushing Rudy's joking advances away, and in the process was kicking a closet door behind him. Around the 3rd or 4th time he kicked the door, an enormous racket occurred. It sounded as if everything that was inside of the closet had just fallen to the floor. We all paused for a moment. Jeffrey noted that he hadn't kicked the door hard enough for anything to fall. Rudy then proceeded to open the closet, and we found that it was in fact empty. The final conclusion was that when Jeffrey had kicked the door, it triggered something in the ceiling to shift around and make that noise. Although that seemed incredibly improbable, we all let it go and went back to what we were doing. Although this time we were all quite a bit more subdued. As I went back to recording the demos, I kept my eyes on that window, more certain that I had seen something. Rudy then asked me what the song I was recording was about. I looked over to him and told him quickly, and when I looked back, I saw the pink blob again. But this time it wasn't a blob. I could see it more clearly, and I saw that it was a hat attached to a human head. I once again alerted the guys about the hatted man, but again by the time they looked over, he had disappeared. Second story. We don't talk to the thing in the woods. I used to love the outdoors. Camping, hiking, hunting, fishing, you name it, I was taking an opportunity to participate in it. My girlfriend was the same. We had bonded over our mutual love of nature and the peace that it brought. Now, I'm terrified to spend any time in the woods. The thing I heard there, its voice still haunts my dreams. We decided on a weekend trip to the Mogollon Rim of northern Arizona. It was going to me, my girlfriend Allison, my friend Amanda, and her husband Dave, and my sister Maria with her boyfriend Gabe. The last two didn't like the idea of roughing it in a tent, so we all went in on a nice cabin in a secluded part of the forest near a lake. The day of the drive, we all packed into my SUV and began the hours-long journey up into the mountains. After what felt like days, we came upon the turnoff given to us by the man who had rented us the cabin. It was at least another hour along uneven dirt road into the depths of the forest before we found ourselves pulling up to our rather luxurious cabin. I couldn't hide my disappointment. I was hoping for something a little less modernized, maybe without natural plumbing or electricity. Maria and Gabe were thrilled, and the others seemed excited too. So I told myself I'd enjoy this little slice of heaven out in the middle of nowhere. After all, how often would I get to stay in a place like this? We unpacked our things, found the key where the text said it would be, and went inside to find another note. The septic system was emptied a few days ago, and the cabin hasn't been used since. You'll find fuel for the generator in a shed about 5 minutes walk from the cabin. Keep the doors locked and the lights off after 10, otherwise you might get unwanted attention. I hope you enjoy your stay. Ernest. I read it out loud and laughed. We've got indoor toilets, power, and all the other modern amenities we could ever ask for. I hope no one thinks we're roughing out here, I teased. My sister just rolled her eyes. Dave and I finished unpacking things and gathered up fishing rods for everyone. The lake's a 20-minute hike from here. Anyone feel like going fishing? Gabe and Maria declined, but the rest of us made the journey out to the lake, and much to our surprise, it was empty. Got the whole thing to ourselves, Dave said with a slap to my back. Hope the fish are biting. We spent the entire day out on the lake, laughing, fishing, drinking, and having a great time. After several wonderful hours, we collected our catches and began the hike back to the cabin. By the time we had gotten back, the sun was disappearing behind the mountains, giving us just enough light to find our way back to the cabin without injury. Upon arrival, we noticed the lights were already on. Guess they got the fuel for the generator, Allison said, amused, didn't think they'd even leave the cabin. That night, we fried up our fish and settled in for a pleasant evening. Even Gabe and Maria enjoyed the fish. The trip was already looking great. We continued this way for 3 days. Everyone enjoying the trip in their own way, with Dave, Allison, Amanda, and myself often leaving early in the morning for a hike or to spend some time out by the lake, and Gabe and Maria hanging out at the cabin. Every night, we'd kill the lights at around 9:45 to follow the wishes of our host. And every morning we'd be up bright and early for another adventure. Everything was turning up aces. We were all having a great time. Then, the fourth night came. Most of us had spent the day on a 6-hour hike through rough trails, and we were beat. We had crashed early, reminding Gabe and Maria that the lights needed to go out by 10 so we could avoid things like bears. They rolled their eyes, but agreed. I woke at 2:30 in the morning to the sound of panicked knocking. Slowly, I moved to sit up, but I felt Allison's hand seize my shoulder as she looked at me and shook her head fiercely. Hello. I heard a man's voice call from the front door of the cabin. Hey, I'm sorry to bother you all so late. It's just, your light was on and I'm kind of lost. I'm trying to find my friends at the trailhead. I think I got turned around somewhere. Hello. The knocking resumed. I opened my mouth to speak, but Allison covered it, whispering. We don't talk to the thing in the woods. I blinked, staring at her in shock. After a while, the knocking stopped, and Allison appeared to relax a little. Until we heard the sound of something gently tapping the window of our bedroom. As I turned my head to look, Allison seized it and kissed me passionately. The tapping continued for several long minutes, during which she held that kiss in my face so that it remained away from the window. When the tapping stopped, she let me go. Her face was ghostly white. It knows we're here now. It won't stop. It's going to come back. What is? I asked, confused. The thing in the forest. What is it? I pressed. She just shook her head and rolled over to go back to sleep. We need to leave tomorrow, she muttered. I didn't sleep much the rest of the night. The sound of the man at the door and his desperation, Allison's insistence that we ignore it, all of it seemed so strange to me. Like there was a piece of this puzzle I was missing. When I finally woke from my restless slumber, Amanda and Dave were already up and making coffee. As I arrived, Dave turned to me and handed me a mug. You tell Allie a scary story last night, or something? She's spooked. White as a sheet. Never seen her like that. I blinked, staring at my coffee and looking up at Dave. He seemed chipper as ever, as though nothing strange had happened the evening prior. You didn't hear all that knocking last night? The guy who got lost? I asked, baffled. Nah, Mandy and I were out like lights. Must have slept well past dawn, too. Man, that hike took a lot out of us. We were thinking of taking it easy tonight, you know? Maybe just head out to the lake and spend some time together. I nodded, looking back down at my cup. Allie said she wants to go home. I murmured, well, that's no good. Amanda called from behind. I just got done talking to her. She said you guys had a bit of a fright last night, that there was a bear or something trying to get in. Or something. I replied, shaking my head. Look, I think it's a good idea. We should head back into town, maybe just go home. Dave frowned. We paid a lot of money to stay here for a week, man. We've only stayed 4 nights. Can we at least stay one more, so it feels like we gained something? I know you got the car and all, but I think maybe Allie just got spooked. We shouldn't rush to leave. I sighed. There was no way I was convincing these two to leave, but maybe Maria and Gabe would be willing to listen. Just because your little girlfriend had a bad dream doesn't mean we should all pack up and run away. Maria stated flatly, we're having a great time out here. When I found Allison, she was still very shaken, her eyes locked in the middle distance, staring deep into the tree-line at something that wasn't there. Hey, I murmured, causing her to jump. Sorry, can we talk? She turned to face me full on. No one wants to leave, do they? They all believe it's nothing, that I'm overreacting to a bear or something. I nodded, and she sighed dejectedly, finding a seat on one of the chairs on the porch. I'm not crazy, she said darkly. I've heard about this thing. My granddad and dad used to me stories about the thing in the forest. They told me to never say anything to it, never acknowledge it or look at it, because if I did and it recognized me, it would take me away. It would take me away and steal everything about me, she shivered. The way they told the stories, it was like they had seen something like that happen. She looked to me, tears forming in her eyes. Remember how I told you my dad died when I was young? That he was mauled by a bear? I nodded. He wasn't. That thing got him. It got him and took everything that made my dad himself away. It left only what it didn't need. I blinked as she told me this story. How do you know that? How can you be sure it wasn't a bear or something? I pressed. Because I heard him. The night after the search teams found what was left of him. I heard my dad calling to us. We all did, she whispered, and my grandpa held me close, and he told me we don't talk to the thing in the woods. We need to leave, she stated again. We can't stay here. I sighed, nodding. How about I get us a motel back in town? It's only a 3-hour drive, and I can come back for the others tomorrow. She shook her head desperately. They won't be here tomorrow, don't you see? It's going to take them. They won't listen. Allie, look, I get what you're saying. You're scared, and it sounds like whatever happened was very traumatic. I can take you away from here, but I can't just force the others to leave, too. She nodded in defeat and looked to me. I'll stay tonight, but I want you to stay with me, and I want you to listen to everything I tell you. I offered a reassuring nod and took her hand. You have my word. We spent the day at the cabin. Allison spent time reinforcing the bedroom door with planks of wood, much to the amusement of everyone else. I followed along with her, providing her whatever help I could, and by the time night fell, our room was a veritable fortress. "Don't talk to the thing in the woods," she told everyone before we killed the lights and went to bed. 2:30 a.m. The door thundered with desperate knocking. "Hello? Please. I need help. Hello? Come on. I know you're in there. I saw the car outside. Please." The knocking rattled the front windows of the house. "The fuck?" I heard Gabe scream. I heard him stomping toward the door. I rose to help, to stop, to do something, but Allison kept an iron grip on my shoulder, shaking her head fervently. "Hello? Is someone there?" I heard a voice. "Please." It was a different voice, feminine this time. Yeah, I'm coming. How the hell did you people find this place anyway?" I heard the door unlock and fly open. "You left the light on for me." The foo dash. I heard Gay cry out, but it was cut short. There were pain gurgles, the sounds of flesh being torn into. Then I heard Maria scream in terror. There was a crash, as if something massive had collided with the furniture in the living room of the cabin. "Help me. Oh my God. Gabe, it got him. Help. Don't run so fast, Maria." I heard Gabe's voice call out. I can barely keep up. "What?" I think she stopped running because all I heard was a scream. There was a click and a loud bang. Dave had brought his hunting rifle with him. I heard a shriek, inhuman and unearthly. Another bang, followed by another shriek. "I don't know what the hell you are, but you aren't leaving alive." Another shot. "Why not? We could all be friends here." Maria's voice chided. "Silly boy, silly boy." Bang. "Silly boy," Gabe's voice mocked. The gunshots stopped. I heard a grunt and cry of pain. Then I heard Amanda. "Dave." "Oh my God." A crash. Then the house fell eerily silent. Allison clenched my shoulder like a vice. Footsteps resounded, heavy and purposeful. There was a knock at our door. "Hey man, we're ready to go." I heard Dave's voice call out before another knock resounded. "Come on, silly," Maria called. "It's early enough for us to get a head start on the day," exclaimed Amanda. This thing was using my friends' voices. I felt the bile creep into my throat. I could barely choke back vomiting as Allison looked desperately at me. "Allie, baby girl, why don't you be a good little ranger and open the door for Daddy? I've got so many things to show you." The color in her face drained completely. I stared at the door in horror as the voice continued. "Daddy doesn't like all this hide and seek. I'm gonna come in." The knocking went from gentle to furious, violent banging. I saw the wood begin to splinter between the planks, reinforcing it. Allison looked me dead in the face. "We don't talk to the thing in the woods," she murmured. "Understand?" I nodded. The door exploded, and Allie threw the covers over our heads, shielding us from the brunt of the splintering door. Then the calm befell everything again. I could hear more clearly now. Every step it took sounded like the creaking of ancient branches. "Where are you, baby? Talk to Daddy," the thing called as it moved deeper into the room. Suddenly, I felt a pressure on the bed. Powerful, spindly branch-like objects wrapped around my form. "What's this? Anything to say?" Dave's voice cooed. I felt a sharp, stinging pain in my thigh, and as I glanced down, what looked like a collection of gnarled branches woven together to form a claw was driving itself deep into flesh. Allison's hand shot over my mouth. I wanted to scream out in agony, but I bit my tongue. I bit so hard the coppery taste of blood flooded my senses. The world was spinning. The pain was excruciating. No crying, no pain. Something raked across my back. My eyes bulged as I felt warmth trickled from my back and begin to cool on the sheets beneath me. "Aw, that's no fucking fun." Gabe cried out, and then I heard something else. A mixture of animals roaring in unison. Bear, mountain lion, wolf, deer, boar. It was a cacophony of beasts, and they were pissed. I heard slamming against the shelves, wood splintering and glass shattering. "Nothing, nothing." Many voices cried in unison. "Talk to me." I said nothing. The thing in our room violently slammed itself into the walls and the decor. It raged for what felt like agonizing hours, and I lay there bleeding. Finally, the noise stopped. "Fine. came a voice neither of us recognized. Fine. I heard the thing stomp away, and the front door was torn from its hinges. Fine. I heard a scream outside. We lay there for a while longer, and I felt myself growing lightheaded. The pain was excruciating. When Allison pulled the covers back, I spared a glance at clock. 3:45, a little over an hour. That's all it had been. I wanted to laugh, but as soon as the cool air of the outside hit me, I passed out. I woke at the hospital. Evidently, I had been unconscious for a little over a day. Allison was sitting in a chair next to my bed, bandages covering many small cuts and scrapes. She told me that it took her some effort, but she was able to haul me into the car and get us into town, and that she was sorry for a few bruises on my body that I had likely sustained during our flight from the cabin. She told me that she had gone up with the sheriffs in the morning to show them what had happened. There were no bodies, just a few pieces of gore and plenty of blood. She showed me pictures she had taken of everything that had happened. The cabin was wrecked. The floors, the shelves, the furniture, everything was destroyed. It looked like she tried to avoid it, but I saw the streaks of where my friends had died, too. It has been 2 years. I haven't gone into the woods, or camping, or fishing since then. Allison and I are married now. I guess a shared trauma like that brought us together. We stay in the desert now, away from the trees, but there have been some nights where I swear I could hear Dave calling for me. Allie assured me that it was just bad dreams, that it didn't come down from the woods, but it didn't help to ease my fears. If this doesn't convince anyone to avoid the woods, then I have only one piece of advice. We don't talk to the thing in the woods. Third story. Don't drive in the woods. I once got stuck near the woods in the middle of nowhere at night. It's probably still my most terrifying experience to this day. I was driving with a friend down a long straight stretch of road that seemed to go on forever through Montana when my car decided to break down on us. It was around 1 a.m. I pulled over with the hazard lights on and rolled to a stop. I hadn't seen another car in hours, so I knew we were screwed. My phone was dead, and my friend couldn't get a serviceable signal. It was a piece of crap pay as you go phone. What now? My buddy Brad asked. I don't know, I said, shrugging my shoulders. Know anything about cars? I asked. I knew we were going to be stuck there for a while. I know I put gas in them, he replied. Well, that helps. I'll take a look, I guess. I got out of the car. It was eerily silent, like we were in a vacuum where no sound could travel. We were miles away from any town or city. The sky looked beautiful, though. It had stars peppered throughout, but on either side of the road sat tall, haunting-looking trees that seemingly ate the light. Looking up, you saw these towering trees stretching skyward like hands, reaching for the impossible heights of the dark sky. I remember feeling like those trees were hiding something. Past the first row of trees sat a blackness that sent cold shivers of fear through my skin. I didn't dare stare into it too long, because my mind would begin to race with all kinds of spooky thoughts. Every shadow that lingered deep always seemed to contain faces or movement. The trees towered over us all the way up to the starlit sky. There was no kind of sound from anything, animals or insects, just my breathing and the soft clicking of my hazard's lights blinking. Click, click, click. I finally popped the hood and just looked at it, hoping it would somehow magically fix itself. It all looked foreign to me. At that moment, I wished I would have spent more time with my dad in the garage learning how to mess with cars instead of playing games on my PC. There wasn't any smoke, which I took as a good sign. As I was staring at the engine, I heard something move in between the trees on the far side of the road. I looked for a few moments, trying to see past the darkness, looking for any kind of shapes. I could see nothing, but the sound of something rustling was apparent, especially inside the eerie silence of that road. I began to get creeped out and got that feeling like something was watching. That nervous, anxious feeling like someone was about to pop up from behind you. The darkness was getting to be too much, and I got back into the car. Well, Brad asked. I replied, shaking off the chills. I don't know what's wrong, but man, it's freaking creepy as hell out there. Oh, don't be a wuss. Then you go out there and take a look? I said, hoping he would, because I didn't want to go back out there. Maybe I will. Then go. but I don't really know anything about cars. Wuss. Fine, I'll look. Brad stepped out of the car and disappeared in front of the popped hood. I started messing with my phone, trying to get some power and maybe a signal. After a few minutes of fumbling with my phone, I saw Brad slowly moving into the middle of the road, trying to see into the tree line on the other side. I rolled down my window and asked what he was doing. "I think I see something," he replied, still looking intently on the trees. "What? What's over there?" "I don't know, man, but I heard something." "I heard something too, like something moving, huh?" "Yeah, man, and I heard whispers too." "Whispers?" I asked, getting those eerie shivers of fear in my skin again. I was hoping he was joking, but the look on his face said otherwise. "Yeah, man." At first I thought it was my imagination, but then I heard it again more clearly. "Do you see anything?" I asked. "Not anymore, but I thought I saw something moving behind the tree line." "Oh man, I'm creeped out." I'm getting back into the car. We locked the doors and sat silently for a few minutes, contemplating our situation. It had been hours since we had seen anyone else on the road. Both our phones were useless, so we just sat there hoping a cop or someone would come along and help. I kept my hazards on in case someone came along. We put on a CD and listened to music for a little while. I tried turning on the car, but it was just a dead click. My hazard lights were on and the radio was playing, so I knew my battery charge was good. We just sat there in the car with towering trees all around us and strange noises from outside. Every once in a while we thought we would see something moving in the trees around us, but we weren't sure. Then all of a sudden the CD that was playing went to a low static hum. Small whispers began coming out of the speakers. We stared silently in disbelief at the radio, trying to make out what the voices were saying. It was small chatter, and we could only make out one word: car. That was enough to send deep spikes of cold fear through our spines. After a few minutes of listening with no other discernible words, the CD came back on. We turned it off and sat wide-eyed in silence, trying to comprehend what we just experienced. "Well, that was creepy," I finally said. Brad sat silently staring down into his lap, wide-eyed. He looked disturbed. "I remember a story my aunt used to tell me," he finally said, "about the woods where she lived. She grew up here in Montana, you know." All the color had drained from his face. He looked worried, but continued. "She told me that there are spirits that live in the woods where she used to live as a little girl. That they try to lure the vulnerable into the woods, sometimes in subtle ways, but other times violently if needed. She said she never knew how far the spirits lived into the woods, but that the forests in Montana weren't a place to dabble with at night. I always thought they were cool, scary stories, but I'm beginning to believe she wasn't making it up." "What kind of stories?" I asked, beginning to feel the pulsating fear in my ears. I couldn't get the feeling like something was watching us out of my head. "I just can't get the stories out of my head right now," he said, shaking his head. "I wish I could not be thinking about them." "But you heard those whispers too." She used to say how when she was young, her and her sisters would all sleep in the same room. Like 5 of them, all sharing 3 beds. Their house used to sit on the edge of the woods, and every once in a while, always at night, her and her sisters would hear childlike whispers coming from the back of the house through their bedroom window, and sometimes even small crying. They would tell their parents, but of course they never heard anything and didn't really believe them. But one night, my aunt woke up to something rubbing against their bedroom window. She woke up her sister sleeping next to her, and they both sat up in bed, listening silently. They looked at the window and couldn't really tell what was rubbing against the window, but my aunt said she remembers it sounding like how your feet sound when rubbing the bottom of the bathtub. She got up and went over to the window, and that's when she began to hear weeping. My aunt remembers standing by the window, hearing the small crying, and then feeling like she was floating. She said that she remembered a certain whisper in some weird language before blacking out. But according to my other aunt, Elizabeth, who was still watching from the bed, says she remembers seeing her sister stand there next to the window as a long dark hand rubbed across the glass, wiping away the moisture on the window. She began screaming for my grandpa and ran to his room and woke him up. She kept yelling, "Hurry, hurry, a monster is taking Mary away, hurry." So my grandpa got up, and the other girl started screaming from the room. He grabbed his shotgun and ran into the room where he saw his little girl screaming and pointing towards the window where Mary was getting pulled out of the window by her hair by a long, dark, muscular arm, tugging and yanking as Mary stayed in some kind of trance. My grandpa slammed the butt of his gun on the arm, and it retreated. He ran outside, and nothing was there. He searched a while in the trees and around the house, but nothing. They would live there a few more years, and then finally move, but my aunt always told me about those whispers and to be careful of what's in the trees because they can lure you in violently if they want. Oh man, you're seriously creeping me out. You thought this was the best time to tell me a story like that? When we're in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by creepy-ass trees. Jesus. Hey man, I'm freaking out too, but you heard those whispers right. Better to be spooked and aware than ignorant, right? I mean, we've seen enough horror movies. Well, I would just rather be home, I said before freezing in fear. I looked out the window behind Brad, and I could see someone or something crawling low to the ground toward our car. I sat there with my mouth open, not moving. Brad looked at me with fear in his eyes before turning around and asking what I saw. I don't know, man, I finally said. It was something crawling on all fours toward our car. It's out there right now. I saw it. We both sat there in cold, paralyzing fear, trying to look out the windows without getting too close. It was absolutely silent. Then we saw something on the far side of the road. Some kind of movement. We stared out the driver's side window to the tree line where we could barely make out a shape. Do you see that? I asked before Brad pulled out his phone and turned on his flashlight. As soon as the light shined over the distance, we both started breathing heavily in fear. My heart sank to the pit of my stomach. Maybe 10 feet into the woods, we could see someone standing there with their backs to us, not moving. Then all our composure fell apart, and fear overwhelmed us, making us gasp and yell in horror as we heard something rub across the back window of the car. We turned and saw something that looked like a hand print stretching across the back window. We turned back toward where we saw the person in the woods, and nothing was there anymore. We were beyond ourselves at this point. We were breathing wildly, and our hearts racing. Then we heard one of the back door's handles clicking like something was trying to get in. The doors were locked, but we were terrified nonetheless. We looked out our windows, but saw nothing. Then the car started swaying from side to side. It must be in the rear, I thought. We both looked toward the back window again, and through the handprint we could see a dark figure peering over the trunk looking at us. It slowly lowered its head and disappeared below our line of sight. I looked out my window again and saw whatever was crawl inhumanly fast across the road and disappear into the woods. We just sat there for a few moments in absolute horror. Then we finally saw it, a car driving up the road. At first we didn't want to get out of the car, but we couldn't pass this chance. We both got out and waved the car down. We didn't want to stay around there anymore, so we got a ride to the nearest town, which was about 20 miles away, and rode with the tow truck back to get the car. We went in the daytime, and when we got back, all the doors were open and all our things were scattered out on the ground, leading into the woods. Before we towed the car, we gathered all our things, but noticed a few things were missing. A picture of me and my sister I kept on the rearview mirror was missing. Brad had kept a photo album in his backpack in the trunk. He thought it would have been missing too, but it was still there. It wasn't until we got back home and settled in that he called me. He told me frantically that there was a picture missing in the album. It was of him and his Aunt Mary. Fourth story, The Whispering Woods. Growing up in a small town, I was always drawn to the woods that surrounded our community. The dense trees, intertwined with vines, concealed secrets and adventures waiting to be discovered. There was one part of the forest, though, that both fascinated and terrified me: the Whispering Woods. The legend said that the Whispering Woods were cursed, a place where the spirits of those who'd gone missing in the forest now resided, their voices forever carried on the wind. The chilling stories told around campfires and at sleepovers had always captivated my young, curious mind. One sunny morning, with my heart racing in anticipation, I decided to venture into the Whispering Woods. I was 12 years old, fearless, or so I thought. As I ventured deeper, I began to hear it, the faintest, eerie whispering, like leaves rustling in the breeze, but forming strange, ghostly words. "Come closer," the whispers beckoned, sending a shiver down my spine. I had been told that if you ever heard the whispers, you should run away as fast as you could. But I couldn't resist. My curiosity got the better of me, and I followed the sounds deeper into the forest. The whispers became more distinct, forming words. They seemed to know my name, repeating it in a haunting chorus. The woods themselves seemed to come alive, the trees bending and swaying as if dancing to an otherworldly rhythm. I finally reached a clearing, and there, bathed in an eerie, otherworldly light, stood a gnarled, ancient tree. Its twisted branches seemed to reach out to me, and I could see the faces of those who had gone missing etched into its bark. They were trapped, their souls held captive by the Whispering Woods. A voice from the tree spoke, soft and melancholy. "We've been waiting for you, young one. We need your help to break the curse that binds us." Fear surged through me, but compassion overcame it. I couldn't leave these souls in torment. "What can I do to help?" I asked, my voice trembling. The tree revealed a hidden compartment within its trunk, and inside, I found an old, weathered journal. It was written by a wanderer who had found himself lost in the woods many years ago. The journal contained instructions on how to perform a ritual to free the trapped souls. For days, I worked tirelessly, collecting the required ingredients and preparing the ritual. When the time came, I stood before the ancient tree, reciting the incantations and performing the ritual as instructed. The air grew still, and the whispers ceased. A blinding light enveloped the tree, and the faces etched into its bark slowly faded away. The spirits were finally at peace, and the curse that had bound them for so long was broken. From that day on, the Whispering Woods were no longer a place of fear, but a sanctuary for the souls that had once been lost. I learned that sometimes courage and compassion can overcome even the most haunting of legends, turning a place of dread into one of hope and healing. Fifth story. My father's cabin in the woods burned down. We found something strange in the ruins. So my father used to own a cabin. In fact, he used to own a lot of different properties, which I suppose is just a roundabout way of saying that we grew up with money. Where things get a bit complicated is how he actually made that money. The line that he constantly fed us was that he was an accountant running his own firm in an office in the city. Long hours, lots of business trips. We never saw him much. And whenever we did, he always seemed tired, his eyes perpetually bloodshot, as if he were always trying to force them to stay open. He was sent off to prison right after I'd finished my first year of college. The sentence? 15 years for washing hundreds of millions of dollars for numerous cartels. 2 weeks after he'd been booked, my mother committed suicide. As it turns out, she'd been helping him out through the entire thing and was facing some time herself. I guess she didn't want to deal with all that and took the drastic way out. A few months later, the government had seized pretty much all his property. All of it except for that cabin in the woods. It took a long time for me to feel normal again, but eventually I managed it. Went back to school and graduated with a good enough GPA, which allowed me to snag some shitty office job a few months later. But it was enough to pay the bills. Fast forward about another year, and I've basically scrubbed that entire sequence of events out of my brain. It took a little bit of therapy, a lot of psychedelics, but I finally did it to the point where I was comfortable enough to go back to that cabin, the one place where I'd see my father for more than a few weeks at a time during our summer trips. I decided to take along 3 of my friends from uni, Jack, Pedro, Randy. We drove down there at the beginning of May. The road leading to the cabin hadn't been maintained at all, and as a result, it had become borderline undrivable. I decided to save my vehicle the stress and parked in a nearby lot, leaving us about a 1.5-mile trek through the woods, which really wasn't so bad. Our time in the cabin was pretty much spent getting drunk and stoned, and by the third night, we had completely run out of food. We decided to take the 30-minute walk over to the nearest rest stop, where I knew that there was a 24/7 diner. So we go there, eat our meals, and on the way back we notice a burning smell in the woods, as if there was a bonfire raging about nearby. Of course, that was a bit strange given that it was around 2 a.m., but we didn't think too much of it at the time, and we kept walking. It was only when the smell continued to grow stronger as we got closer to the cabin that we understood something was very wrong. Soon it had become suffocating, and we could see the night sky tinged with orange in the near distance. I felt my heart drop into my stomach, and immediately I was sprinting. My worst fear realized as I reached the clearing where the cabin was located. Completely up in flames, plumes of dark smoke blending in with the night. It was a mix of different emotions that hit me all at once, the combination of them creating a sense of dread so deep I hadn't thought it possible. After reeling myself in, I called 911, with the operator telling me that the fire department would be on their way but wouldn't be able to reach us for at least 30 minutes. The four of us walked away from the cabin in silence, getting far enough so that the smoke was no longer scratching at our throats. Around 10 minutes later, we noticed that the orange tinge in the sky had suddenly disappeared. And I mean suddenly, like gone in a single blink. I thought I might have been hallucinating, but it was clear from their expressions that my friends were seeing something similar. Cautiously, we started making our way back towards the cabin, noticing that the smoke was no longer heavy in the air, having cleared up considerably. Once we reached the clearing, it had disappeared altogether. I looked ahead, my brain working overtime to comprehend the sight before me. The cabin was no longer on fire. Burnt to a crisp, sure, but the raging, overwhelming flames that had been consuming it just minutes prior had somehow completely fizzled out. The four of us looked between each other, as if to confirm we were all still seeing the same thing. Using the flashlight on my phone to survey the damage, I found pretty much what I'd expected. Complete destruction. Absolutely zero hope of recovering anything. I started taking some deep breaths, try to calm myself down when I heard Pedro yelling out from the other side. "Guys, where did this thing come from?" We all walked over to him. Nestled in the debris was the corpse of something. A monstrosity. It was about the size of a bear, with the sections of its body that weren't burnt showing pale, clammy skin with deep cuts etched throughout it, in what looked to be some kind of crude pattern. Its head had been smashed in, leaving nothing but an abnormally wide bottom jaw, which was still bearing long, black teeth. It had an uncountable number of long, thick arms that it was using to hold something that resembled a human infant, one that appeared to be completely unscathed, devoid of any burn marks. The longer I stared at it, the more that I was convinced I could see it breathing. It was a bizarre enough sight to put us into a near trance. What eventually snapped us out of it was the chanting. It was barely noticeable at first, slowly escalating in pitch until it was clear that there were several human voices shouting in unison. Their tones were animalistic, their words strung together with just the bare beginnings of a rhythm. It sounded like they were speaking English, though I could hardly make out anything they were saying. The strangest part, though, was how quickly it was getting closer to us. Definitely not a walking pace. It was more like a sprint. The four of us shared a quick glance between each other, and immediately there was an understanding. We ran like bats out of hell, tripping over branches, our own feet. But eventually we reached my car, all of us scrambling to pile into it. As I was fumbling for my keys, the chanting had become deafening to a point that hardly made sense. It sounded as if there were speakers lined up in a circle around us, all blasting that horrible noise. And the second that I had put the keys into the ignition, things went silent. I found myself holding my breath as I looked up, my eyes slowly adjusting to the darkness until what I was seeing was unmistakable. Several figures standing completely still at the edge of the woods. All human-shaped, but far too large to be people. All the air being held in my lungs flooded out with one big exhale, and I slammed the vehicle in a drive and took a sharp turn before speeding the hell out of there, refusing to look in the rear view until we had made it into the highway. I drove until I had reached the rest stop, which was now hosting an absurd number of police cars. I parked, got out, and approached one of the cops, asking if they were here because of the fire. The cop shook his head. Fire? No. Has there been a fire? I explained the situation with the cabin to him, deciding to leave out the creature and the chanting for the time being. The cop nodded slowly, his expression remaining largely the same throughout. All right, he said. We'll look into it, and then give you an update in the morning. For tonight, just get a hotel or something. We exchanged numbers, and I thanked him. As I began to walk away, he called out to me. Hey, can I ask you something? I turned back around. Yeah, I said. Sure. Do you happen to be my dad's name? S. Son? For a while I just stared at him. Eventually I nodded. Yeah, he said. I thought I recognized you. I don't understand, I told him. I've never seen you before. The cop took a deep breath before taking a quick look around. Come here, he said. Come close. Tentatively, I did so. I can't tell you everything. I don't even know everything. But I think you should have the right to know the truth about your father. All of the stuff that's happened here tonight, all of the shit that you've seen, it has something to do with him. He took another look around before continuing. Cartels, right? Was that the story they told you? It's not so creative. But I guess it doesn't have to be creative to be believable. 'Cause the shit that he was actually mixed up in, you would not believe unless you've seen it for yourself. What the hell are you talking about? I asked. Look, I have your number. I'll be in touch tomorrow morning. This is something I'm curious about as well. Maybe you can give me some answers, point me in the right directions. But not here. So get out of here before people start noticing you. And stay safe. I didn't feel like staying in a hotel that night, so I drove back into the city, dropping everybody off before arriving back in my own apartment. Of course, I couldn't sleep that night. My eyes wired open into the morning as I waited for the officer call. He still hadn't by the time that noon rolled around, and so I tried calling him instead. No answer. Eventually, I did receive a call from the police, telling me that my father's cabin had burned down and that it was due to a forest fire. I told them that wasn't possible because there had been no forest fire and that I suspected foul play and wanted it to be investigated. It's already been investigated, are the exact words that the officer told me. Don't worry about it. Just get in touch with insurance. Go over your options. And before I could say anything else, he had hung up on me. It was a mixture of anger and curiosity that compelled me to drive back down there. I'm not sure what I was expecting, but it certainly wasn't for the road leading towards the rest stop to be blocked altogether. There were 2 cop cars guarding the barrier, with a single officer signaling any vehicles approaching to turn around. I pulled over to the side of the road, and after some careful deliberation, I decided to get out and approach him and ask what was going on, just to see what he might say. When I finished the question, he stared at me for a long time. Uncomfortably long. Emergency construction is what he eventually told me. After that encounter, I pretty much dropped trying to figure things out. Some weird things have started happening to me since. Every night, I swear I can hear a baby crying in the apartment across from mine. The apartment that I thought had been occupied by a pair of college kids who definitely do not have children. That cop that was supposed to call me finally did, a few nights ago. When I answered, I was met with dead silence on the other end. Nearly 30 seconds of it until the line clicked dead. There's an abandoned house sitting across the street from my apartment building, one that's supposedly been there for years because the development of the store meant to take its place keeps getting delayed. Somebody has started staring at me through its second-floor window. Whenever I catch them doing it, they're quick to close the blinds, so I can never catch any details. But I know that the moment I turn away from it, their eyes are back on me. I can't confirm that any of these things are related, whether it has anything to do with my father. I just know that I don't want to deal with it and that I want it to end. 6th story. The boy in the woods took everything from me. It's all over. Everything I had, everything I was going to be, it's all gone and I don't know how I can move forward. My wife, my sweet baby girl, my home. And it's because I found that boy. I wish I never had. I've visited the woods often before. I would head off to clear my head after a long week of work on our farm. It was one of the rare places round these parts that was untouched by buildings, signs, all human fingerprints. And it's only gotten worse since then. But as I was wandering, admiring a small colony of mushrooms at the time, I spotted some movement in the brush, maybe 30 feet off. Hoping for a glance at the local wildlife, I stayed low and quiet and crept toward the perimeter of the brush. Dividing myself from the stillness beyond was a bramble of sharp thorns, bearing what looked to be wild blackberries. I picked one or two while listening and waiting. Another rustling, this time accompanied by what sounded like a sharp intake of breath. My brow furrowed. Somebody out there? No response. Some birds were stirred from their nests and scattered into the air. I stood up, peering through the foliage, unable to spot anything of note. And so I carried on, making my way deeper into the woods. There was no established path there, just an approximate direction I had grown to know and enjoy. My marker to turn back was a large, thick oak that stood at the edge of a river. On the other side of that river was a few acres of land that were caught in a bidding war between a couple acquaintances of mine. Beautiful land with so much possibility, but for some reason, no one had a claim on it. If I could afford it, I'd take a piece. But I didn't cross the river to venture there myself. As I finished making my way around a new route to this usual spot, I saw him. He was caked with mud and dirt, fully naked, and with deep scratches on one leg. He had to have been barely 5 years old, around my daughter's age. I immediately broke into a sprint towards the poor child, so young and exposed to elements as he was. He was huddled up against the oak, picking thorns from his injured leg with shaky hands. I asked him his name, how long he'd been out here, where his parents were, but he didn't respond, aside from some whimpering. I calmed myself, wanted to put on a brave face for the boy. Did you get these cuts following me? I produced one of the blackberries. After a moment of hesitation, he took the berry from me. Well, I'm here now, and I'll get you cleaned up and back to your mommy and daddy. Does that sound good? He nodded, wiping tears from those deep, green eyes. I took some rubbing alcohol and gauze from the first aid pocket of my bag. I warned him that the alcohol could sting, but the child didn't wince in the slightest as I cleaned up his leg. I assumed he was just unusually tough. I dressed the leg, then asked if I could lift him up. Once again, he nodded, and we stood by the river. Now, where are Mommy and Daddy? I asked. He pointed over my shoulder, across the river. I stood, taking that in for a moment. He must have wandered incredibly far from home, if that was the case. It was a 45-minute trek for an adult to get to the nearest home across that unowned land, unless there were some squatters living somewhere, or perhaps the child was abandoned here. The dreadful possibilities crossing my mind, I gave a smile to the boy, agreed to follow his lead, and began wading across the shallow river. Trying to coax word from the boy, I began calling out Mommy and Daddy to the expanse of land. He did not join in, only pointing whenever he felt I'd strayed from the path. I was exhausted from my hike already, but decided to try for a little longer before simply bringing him to my home and attempting to get in contact with the parents the next day. The sun was beginning to redden as it set. Eventually, we reached a point where he was pointing directly into a very thick area of wood, shading from the light and making movement quite difficult. I continually offered another route around this difficult terrain, but he shook his head, steadfast. For a moment it crossed my mind I was being lured into some sort of sick trap, the child being a lure so that the parents can wreak whatever violence they want on the sucker. But I shook those thoughts away once more. I assumed this was the path he took, and he'd be lost if we went another way. The small child would be able to navigate this area much easier than I could. So I took a deep breath, and I began pushing through the branches and weeds. I could surmise the path the boy would have taken, following the area of least resistance, sticking close to the ground and shielding his frail figure from the lashing branches. I don't do well with tight spaces, so my heart began to beat faster and faster as I felt my movement become more restricted. Every couple steps, my foot would get caught in a hole in the ground or wrapped in some plants. But the brush wasn't very big. I'd be in clear air soon. If there was nothing to be seen in clear air, I was heading back home. This was enough. But I realized my steps were taking me down an incline much deeper than I expected, and the foliage above was blocking far too much light. My eyes had to adjust quickly to the darkness I found myself surrounded by. And where was the sound of the woods? The crickets, the trickling river, the birds? Instead, I almost thought I could hear music from farther below. The boy wriggled from my arms and began to run ahead. I protested, but he continued on, finally vocalizing. I wish he hadn't. He didn't speak. He made a small, rubbing, clicking noise as he went. It was a disturbing sound, like the chirping of katydid, and it made me feel sick to my stomach. Then a deeper, more complex chirping responded. A woman, just as naked as the boy, and her hair knotted with twigs and filth, crawled into view from the brush and took him in her arms. Her eyes were too big, the same shade of green as the child, and her ears, nose, and extremities all seemed too sharp. My first impulse was to grab the boy from this thing, but he nuzzled into her, chittering and clicking, and I could hardly bring myself to move. Then she shot her eyes to me. She shrunk away for a moment, chittered to the child, who only giggled, then locked eyes with mine. She began to croak out words, real English words, using that horrible noise. I am. Sorry. I am. So. Sorry. That was all I could take. I thrashed my surroundings, clawed at the dirt beneath me, and began to climb up out of this strange place with these awful creatures. Nature tore my skin as I barreled blindly towards safety, not sure where safety was, but knowing it was up, knowing it was daylight. I stumbled into the clear air and fell onto my back. I breathed heavily, sobbing and coughing up dust and grime. But I was safe. I was home. Or so I thought. I opened my eyes. It was night. Had that much time really passed while I was down there? I pulled myself to my feet and left behind the brush, the river, and the boy. Much more time had passed than I thought. In those few moments, with the woman and her son, 70 years passed. My wife is long deceased. My daughter, recently so. Where my farm stood is now a small town. Everything I was or had is gone, and my name is a local oddity in this town, according to the first person I spoke to in this new world. Edwin Welch? Hilarious. The old folks say the fairies got him. Thanks a lot for watching the video. Till the end, subscribe to Horror in Detail for more videos. Drop your suggestions in comment section.